So I got the Apple iPhone 13 Pro in this new Sierra blue color finish one day after its official availability was announced. So I'm a bit late to the party, but I thought I'd make this video because as a long-term Android user, I've never really thought I would jump ship over to the iPhone series, but here we are, and there's a few reasons why I did this, and I want to explain them in this video and talk to you guys about the change process, whether or not I'm going to stick to the Apple iPhone 13 Pro, and a whole lot more with cameras, performance, and all of that. So before we get started, I just want to show you guys what comes inside the box. You've probably seen hundreds of these unboxings, but the box is nothing new compared to last year. You get the same small box with limited accessories. You're looking at a Type-C to Lightning cable for charging the device, some paperwork including the Apple sticker, and the phone that's covered up on one side with this white sort of sticky film. I expected a bit more branding or marketing for the iPhone 13 Pro's ProMotion display during the setup process, and there was literally no mention of it. ProMotion is special in the fact that it sort of makes the elements on screen just feel a bit more smoother because of the higher refresh rate of the display on the iPhone 13 Pro, and that's one of the key reasons why I actually went with the Pro variant as opposed to the iPhone 13. The iPhone 13 or the 13 mini don't come with ProMotion, only the 13 Pro and the 13 Pro Max have this feature. While this smooth sort of performance is evident in some places like scrolling through the iOS 15 user interface, it seems like a lot of the applications that you use on a daily basis still need time to adapt and to take advantage of that higher refresh rate. But let's face it, iOS is phenomenally optimized with its animations, and even at a lower refresh rate, things do look pretty smooth. The way social media applications work, flow, and function is just something that even Android flagships can't really keep up with, and this is coming from an Android fan. Plus, with the A15 Bionic CPU that's inside and 6GB of RAM, the overall hardware that's on board the iPhone 13 Pro is enough to pretty much power any of your experiences. I do want to put this to the test very extensively in a future video, so if you want to stay tuned for that, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out. But the panel, this is a 6.1-inch Super Retina XDR, and it has a variable refresh rate between 10 and 120 Hz for optimized battery life. But unlike something you'd use on Android where the difference between 60 Hz and 120 Hz is evident, I found it pretty hard to tell so far on the iPhone 13 Pro. Yes, there is a smoother experience throughout the UI as I mentioned, but even when it switches back to 60 Hz, the experience still remains smooth. So I just think this is the magical touch that people talk about with iOS that I'm just experiencing for one of the first times. I think it's also worth pointing out that smaller notch at the top. So Apple says the notch is 20% smaller, although when I do look at the smartphone and use it on a regular basis, it hardly makes a difference. Sure, it might make the iPhone 13 Pro look a bit more aesthetically pleasing, but there's no real benefit to this reduction whatsoever. There's no extra information on the status bar, so what's really the point of this smaller notch? The least Apple could have done was to make sure that the battery percentage was actually visible on the status bar, but you don't get that as well. You have to sort of scroll down and you'd be able to see the battery life. I thought that could be a feature that they could have used to market the smaller notch, but it's not there. Don't get me wrong though, the technology that Face ID has built into that smaller notch is impressive, but I think that Face ID technology is what's holding this smartphone back for me. I'm used to having different sort of unlocking methods on my Android smartphones, things like under-display scanners or fingerprint scanners off to the side or the back of the smartphone, but you don't get any of these options here. You only get Face ID for biometrics, which is a drawback considering most of the time when I'm out and about, I do have to wear a mask in the time that we live in. So when you have a mask on, Face ID is pretty much useless. It doesn't work. So I've had to change my passcode on the iPhone, made it a really easy passcode for me to be able to access the smartphone as fast as I can when I'm on the go, which definitely doesn't make it the most secure way to do so, but that's the most convenient way I could get that to work. If this thing had a way for Face ID to work with the mask on, I know if you have an Apple Watch, you can do that, but there's hardly any point spending more money just to be able to unlock an iPhone at the end of the day. I've tried different ways where Face ID could be tricked into working with a mask, but that hasn't worked either. The only solution I feel Apple has missed out on with the iPhone 13 Pro is the fact that Touch ID is not present on the device. I feel like if they couldn't make under-display Touch ID work, the least they could have done was to have Touch ID built into the power button off to the side. That would have made the iPhone 13 Pro just a bit more complete in my opinion. The last thing about the display I want to talk about is media consumption and content. For starters, it's an excellent panel, really bright, up to 1000 nits, and I've had no issue using it outdoors. 16:9 content looks fantastic, and with it paired with those incredible stereo speakers that you get on the phone, it is a really good multimedia consumption device. I've had plenty of other devices to review when it comes to audio, but these stereo speakers do sound fantastic. But the reduction of the notch off to the sides also makes it slightly longer when it comes to the overall height, which is a bit of a problem because it cuts into 18:9 content by just a fraction, and that is unacceptable. The OCD in me definitely gets triggered by this, and once I've seen it, I want to unsee it, but I can't. These key differences aside, the iPhone 13 Pro is pretty much the iPhone 12 Pro with a few minor tweaks in terms of design. I wouldn't say from a 12 Pro you're gonna feel a massive difference in design, but say you're coming from an iPhone 10 or an iPhone 11, then the difference in design is definitely going to be noticeable. When it comes to thickness, you're looking at a 7.65mm chassis, so plenty thin, but also 204 grams, which is a hefty body, and if you hold it in the hand, it does feel like a chunky smartphone. It's also not ideal to use on a flat surface given the camera bump at the back, which makes the smartphone wobble, so that could be something you'd want to keep in mind. Maybe perhaps throwing on a case on the smartphone could fix that. But overall, as weird as this sounds, even though the phone does feel chunky, it still feels really nice in the hand. And I think the reason for that is because it's not as big. And that's one of the primary factors in me considering the Pro over the Pro Max. I feel like with the same design, the Pro Max just feels very unwieldy in a way where it becomes uncomfortable and heavy to use after, 5 or 10 minutes of using it. Whereas with the iPhone 13 Pro, it's really the perfect size for me with the hands that I have. So that's why I went with the Pro and not the Pro Max. Apple says the front of the phone has ceramic shield protection, and I don't really think it makes a difference. Ceramic shield tends to scratch very easily. I've seen it already online. I haven't experienced that on my unit. My unit is still scratch free, which is excellent. I wish it stays that way for the most part because I don't like using screen protectors or cases on my smartphones. And of course, you also get IP68 water and dust resistance. So when it comes to durability, you have yourself covered. There's nothing to worry about. Although one key thing that I want to complain about maybe is that stainless steel frame. It looks nice, it feels nice, although it smudges very easily, almost to the point where as soon as I unboxed the smartphone and held it in my hand for the first time, it looked dirty. So I wish this was aluminium because aluminium just makes it a whole lot cleaner, the appearance, whereas with stainless steel, if you want to keep it new or want to keep it looking new, you have to constantly sort of clean it with a cloth, and that way it might stay new. But that's just a minor thing that I want to point out. I think aluminium just works better. And I know at this point I've rambled on and on about the iPhone 13 Pro, but I think no impression video is sort of complete without talking about the camera package. It's still a triple camera setup on the back, slightly bigger, but the island doesn't really feel big unless you compare it with the iPhone 12 Pro or the 12 Pro Max. But yes, it is slightly bigger. It sort of has a better look than the iPhone 12 Pro now that you put them side by side, and the cameras are still the same. It's a 12 megapixel wide, 12 megapixel ultra wide, and 12 megapixel telephoto lens, although the sensors are different. They're from Sony this time, and you get better optimization. So the 12 megapixel telephoto now has 3x optical zoom, and the ultra wide angle lens also doubles as a better one for low light photography and macro photography. I've had my time playing around with the iPhone 13 Pro's camera, and the quality has been really good. I saw the biggest jump in quality when it comes to the ultra wide angle lens in low light, as I said, and of course when using that macro camera, which is a feature that we've never had on an iPhone before. But I do want to make an in-depth camera comparison coming up with the Galaxy S21 Ultra, which should be fun, and I should be able to give you more detail on how that cinematic mode works on the phone, something I haven't had time to play around with just as much as I would have liked to do. So I'll leave it at that. In terms of battery life, I don't want to go into it in detail because I haven't really had a day where I've tested the smartphone with 5G, with intense camera usage, with intense social media. So I want to save my thoughts for battery in an upcoming video. But I do want to say from 100% to around 55% is where the iPhone 13 Pro ended up being when I used the camera extensively for all my testing that I've done for the camera comparison that is coming up. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about my impressions on the iPhone 13 Pro. If you want to know anything in particular about the device or my experience, definitely do leave a comment down below. I'll be sure to address it, and definitely subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this one coming up. Thanks for watching. This was Vaibhav, and I'll see you in the next one. Adios.